Thanks for asking. Appreciate that.
Now that's exciting stuff.
I'm stoked for you.
So what I am, I guess I'm just blind and have never paid attention. The Navy's center down by the Buffalo Yacht Club.
Yes.
I never noticed it until this weekend.
Oh, really?
I'm that oblivious. Like I have, when I have somewhere to go, I just have somewhere to go. But I've never.
Yeah, that's a reserve.
Yeah.
Mr. Spitzer? Sean Doyle, nice to meet you.
Oh, come on.
How you doing? Great.
I did.
We'll go back in good shape.
Oh, yeah, the good stuff, right? I used to have 2 jobs almost a day, and then I just playing on. I just cooked for myself, so I said, all right, let's go black.
Okay.
Really?
Oh,
Oh, today's the big walk out of school at 10 o'clock.
Oh, is it?
We'll see what happens there, but
Unmask our children.
it sounds like there's more rumblings amongst the parents on social media than there is amongst the students.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. I did a pickup yesterday. I was here and it's like. Oh.
Listen. Here's they don't have a choice, and here's the big thing. If you don't want to send your kids to school, you can homeschool them. You can send them to private school. You have other options. Yeah. I'll share.
It's okay.
Listen, if you don't make a big deal.
Oh,
of it,
now the meeting can be real.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, but it's like, it shouldn't be the news.
I'm willing to share.
You just want to get a better camera.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
She's posing.
Yeah, what's the big deal?
Okay. Are we ready?
It's football Friday.
Let's get rolling here. Late start at 8. Can't go yet. All right, I'll go start with roll call for our public hearing and special meeting of the Hamburg Industrial Development Agency. I'll go around the room here. Mr. Reynolds. Present. Ms. McGregor Clark.
Here.
Mr. Hutchison.
Here.
Mr. Moses.
Here.
Mr. Kukowski.
Here.
Ms. Norma Russer Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Palmer. Here. Okay, and excused are Cam Paul and Wentz Valentin. Thank you. Next, Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, first item is a public hearing, notice of public hearing and special board meeting, Town of Hamburg Industrial Development Agency, is published in the Hamburg Sun. Please take notice that the Town of Hamburg Industrial Development Agency will hold a public hearing and special board meeting on Friday, September 10th, 2021 at 8:30 a.m. in the Blaisdell Village Hall, courtroom 121 Miriam Avenue, Blaisdell, New York, and by Zoom video conference to consider the following proposed financial assistance requested of the agency. Key Capture Energy request for agency assistance in the form of a lease in an amount not to exceed $19,613,354. The assistance contemplated by the agency will include real property tax, sales and mortgage recording abatement in accordance with existing agency uniform tax exemption policy and guidelines as amended. Delphi Enterprises Incorporated, the lessee, and Key Capture Energy, collectively the applicants, request assistance in connection with the leasing by sublessee of an approximately 12-acre parcel of land and improvements located at 2026 Electric in the village of Blaisdell. The installation of a 20-megawatt battery energy storage facility. The sublessee as agent for the agency of 20-watt battery, 20 megawatt battery energy storage facility required in connection therewith by the sublessee as agent for the agency, all for an electric storage and distribution facility for the lease to the agency and subsequent sublease to the lessee for sublease to the sublessee. The project will allow the sublessee to continue its operations in New York State. The project will be subleased to the lessee for a sublease to the sublessee, which will be the sole occupant of the project. The agency will present information relative to this project and application at the hearing. Persons interested may attend and will be given an opportunity during the hearing, excuse me, to make statements. Also, written comments may be submitted to the agency at or before the hearing. We did encourage all interested parties to submit written comments to the agency, which will be included within the public hearing record until that period closes at 1:00 p.m., which was yesterday, Thursday, September 9th, 2021. Motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the public hearing is open. For Key Capture Energy, we have a couple, for the project applicant, we have a couple representatives here. Mr. Taylor Quarles with Key Capture Energy and their legal representation, Mr. Dan Spitzer with Hudson West. If you like, would you just like to review the project in general and the scope of it, and the investment in Blaisdell? Thanks, Taylor.
That'd be great. Prop this here, but happy to bring it closer if anyone has any questions. So thanks for everyone's time and for setting up this meeting. My name's Taylor Quarles. I work with Key Capture Energy. Key Capture is an Albany-based company that develops standalone energy storage projects. We were founded in 2016 and currently have projects in the state of New York, various locations in New England, and also down in Texas, where we have also a office in Houston. Our sole focus as a company is developing standalone energy storage projects. We were founded in 2016 by several individuals who had previously worked in the renewable energy industry. Really founded the company out of a recognition that as the grid is slowly shifting away from fossil fuel usage and towards intermittent renewables, that energy storage would play an important role in ensuring the reliability of the grid for industrial, commercial, and residential customers. So currently in the state, Key Capture has 2 operational energy storage projects. The first is the largest project in the state up near Stillwater, north of Albany. It's also a 20 megawatt project, so a similar amount of energy able to be injected and withdrawn from the grid. And then the second is down in Rockland County. That was a partnership with Orange and Rockland, where we're helping them to essentially avoid the need to build additional distribution infrastructure by installing an energy storage project instead. So they found that use to be a more cost-effective way to solve the grid need and effectively, save money for their ratepayers. More broadly than that, we're developing projects across the state, from the Village all the way down to Long Island. So really see it as an important use moving forward. The project in question is on, as Sean shared, the project in question sits in between South Park and Electric Avenue. We're proposing a 20 megawatt energy storage facility, which will interconnect to the national grid 115 kV lines that are running just south of the project. So in terms of the project components, starting with the point of interconnection substation, there's going to be a fenced gravel yard that primarily is built to enclose and contain the main power transformer, which is utilized to shift the voltage from 34.5 kV up to 115 kV. And then there'll be other, required switches and breakers. The design of the substation is, per coordination with the utility and per the interconnection process that we're going through with them. Secondly, and in relation to that interconnection process, there's proposed to be a 95-foot communications tower. That's a requirement of the utility and utilized to communicate with from this point of interconnection to the nearby substations to ensure that there's a uninterrupted and solely designed communication source to ensure that if something happens and they decide to trip a nearby substation, they can immediately communicate with our project. And then thirdly, the energy storage project is also proposed to be a gravel yard fenced with screening and landscaping around at least two sides and facing Electric Avenue. The gravel yard will contain the energy storage, essentially containers, purpose-built electrical enclosures, as well as medium voltage transformers and inverters, which adjust the electricity from alternating to direct current and back. The containers themselves will contain all of the communications and fire detection safety equipment. So prior to operations, we'll be working with the local emergency services to ensure that both before construction starts and before the project is operational, that they've had the ability to visit the site, see the project, and fully understand its systems and controls. During operations, the project's going to be operated 24/7 remotely by trained operators that are communicating via essentially a internet connection, called a supervisory control and data acquisition system. It allows them to communicate 24/7 with the system and monitor everything that's going on. In terms of the permitting process, the project as envisioned and shown here was approved earlier this year by the village. We received a secret negative declaration and a site plan approval. I'm certainly interested and happy to answer any other questions that the board has. There were a couple of questions submitted by a member of the public that I think you all have in front of you. I think I did address some of the answers just in my description of the project. And certainly there's a couple others, I guess, that I'll try to touch on proactively, but if you all have any others you think I missed, or if there's any other questions, just let me know. So one question was about decommissioning. So the project has a useful life. We design it for about 20 years. We take into consideration the natural degradation that occurs with energy storage. Everyone is sort of familiar with your phone or your laptop computer, slowly having less battery capacity over time. It's the same with a system like this. So we designed the system to be able to be augmented. Basically, we can come in and add additional batteries to the system as envisioned to ensure that it can last for the full 20 years. At that point, we obviously have some valuable infrastructure that can continue to serve the grid. So at that time, we can choose to replace the system, basically swap out the cells, or we can choose to decommission the entire project. I think on the decommissioning front, lithium ion energy storage is utilized in electric cars and consumer electronics and a lot of other sources. So there's a really big push to continue to make the decommissioning and recycling process more efficient. There's actually currently a recycling facility for lithium ion batteries in New York, and I would envision over the coming years and decades before this project will be decommissioned, there'll be a robust infrastructure to support the ultimate recycling. There's also a question as to whether this project was related to any other renewable project, like any other wind or solar project. It's not, it's a standalone project. Certainly, it does play a role in the broader grid infrastructure, but it's not related to any other project.
So you can't, could you tie it into the windmills that we have over on the lake right now?
Not directly.
Not directly, only through power lines.
Yeah, we are actually coordinating with them. We're required, part of the interconnection process is National Grid, communicating with other interconnecting generators in the area. So we're actually in conversations with them to ensure that, the appropriate coordination takes place, but not directly. I mean, effectively, though, the electrons are flowing
Right.
in our direction. So.
Right. Well, I mean, because of our move to energy efficiency, I know solar energy and wind energy, and I think this is the way you have to go for battery storage and stuff like this. But you could, if it became a bigger part of our electrical field. I mean, obviously Niagara Falls is pretty huge here, but if they did come, that we would have the capability to store that electricity.
Absolutely.
Are you purchasing the power at off-peak times? Is that the concept?
Yeah, I would say the system sort of has twofold. Number one, you hit it on the head. We can shift power for, from say the middle of the night when the wind is blowing to the next afternoon when it's really hot out and everyone's running their AC. So it's sort of a medium-term shifting of electricity. And then the project can also respond really quickly if there's any kind of grid event where the utility or the grid operator needs an immediate response. We can also, immediately charge or discharge to keep the grid in a safe position.
Can you go a little further into that, just because we're on public, we're on Zoom and everything? What do you think that battery would supply to the village if it was like an emergency situation with lost power, because then you guys have power? How long do you think something like that would be able to provide, I don't know, houses or stuff, but in power into the, just say the village and stuff like that? How long do you think that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote my master's thesis on microgrid, so anytime I ask questions.
I got my micro thesis on it.
This is basically like another generator on the grid in terms
Right.
of the utility will control it in terms of when it needs it and not. In terms of an emergency backup, which we're talking about,
Right.
That's a concept called microgrids, where you basically have solar, wind, and batteries that can be isolated from the system and then serve a particular load, such as police, fire, and other
Right.
emergency services. This is not currently set up as this method. Frankly, New York doesn't really have a robust regulatory structure to incentivize microgrids. They started working on something called the New York Prize. It didn't really go forward. We do have some microgrids. If you remember Sandy, there were about 3 spots in New York City that were still lit up.
Right.
Those were all microgrids. One was Goldman Sachs, one was Co-op City, and the other was Princeton University. And those were all built as standalone systems so that when the grid went down, they're able to automatically flip a switch and isolate and go on as a separate system. This project is not set up that way. The P-Capture can certainly work with local entities to create a microgrid. Their facilities and the kind of stuff they build certainly fit into that if it financially is viable to do that. We are starting to see the Buffalo Niagara campus has been working on the medical campus has been working on a microgrid for some time. They've been one of the leaders actually in the country trying to open it, where they'd be able to isolate the medical campus if anything went down. I'm not sure where that currently stands, but that's one of the prices. But what you're talking about is storage is a key element of backup, and that's why a lot of people now can even buy from Tesla something called Powerwall, which is backup for your house instead of a gas generator. But the kind of isolated situation you're talking about, which is the microgrid, this facility is not designed to do. This facility is basically a generator on the grid.
Right. No, that's great. And the reason I asked is, is there potential to do something like that if in the next 20 years, where you would essentially set it up here in the village of Blaisdell to, for the fire stations or the police or anything like that?
There's a potential. This particular project being financed based on current expectations from the state in terms of tariffs, in terms of the available resources. The state of New York doesn't currently recognize as revenue sources a lot of things that batteries can do. For example, the whole grid goes down. You restart it basically with batteries if you have it. And then there's a facility in the central part of the state called the Blenheim Gilboa Stored Power, which is how New York Power Authority would use to restart the grid if they needed to. And that's a very large storage facility where they pump water uphill and then pump it down.
I'm in the hydrogen. Hydrogen's the hydrogen.
let's talk-
That's why I look at this. It's one of the big things I've been always trying to push
Yeah,
in my years is getting off of gasoline and getting into hydrogen. And I know they're doing more in California with
well, they're
hydrogen
doing
stuff.
some in New York too. We're working on projects at the Port of Albany, but the way you could, I mean, obviously this company is in business to make money.
Right.
So they have a tariff that they work into. They don't have a PPA situation, so they're basically selling you the grid. Let's say you had an opportunity to create green hydrogen on somewhere in Blaisdell, which obviously is a very well-developed industrial community you have here in Hamburg. And we obviously have a great water source, which is what we need for green hydrogen. You could potentially go to this battery company and say, we'd like to pay you to be part of this. becomes then a revenue stream, and they can make more money being part of that project as opposed to selling their energy into the grid.
That's great.
What hydrogen is gonna take, besides a lot of capital to make it more cost effective, is something that Western New York is absolutely set up for. When you think about the really cheap hydropower that we have and the ability to, what was available to support what was Bethlehem Steel. When Bethlehem closed down, they actually left 4 substations in place. And one of the things that made Steel Winds work economically is they picked up an entire substation for $12,000. I know that because I represented the city when they raised the assessment to like $2 million. We have great electrical infrastructure, great grid. What batteries do is they come along and they provide the time. So one of the things that's happened in West New York is that we lost Huntley, we lost Dunkirk.
Right.
And so literally the New York Power Authority put out a 100-megawatt RFP, even though it's got this giant power plant in Niagara Falls, a lot of that energy is already spoken for. And so they put out an RFP to get additional energy. When something like batteries come along and you hit that peak, and this is something why it's really, they're building a lot of these in New York City, and then the other areas where Taylor is working on. The first things that click on tend to be, in terms of when you need more energy, tends to be your dirtiest plants, the ones that don't operate full time. One of the things these facilities do is they keep fossil fuel plants from producing more energy. And although we're mostly out of Robert Moser's here, we still do have significant fossil fuel. New York is really, our pricing is still based on natural gas, and especially as we're closing down our nuclear plants. So these battery plants actually fill a gap both in terms of keeping the dirtiest and most expensive plants offline, but also in terms of enabling those intermittent resources like wind and solar to operate efficiently and take a greater part of the grid. There's a number of projects that are looking at green hydrogen, and to truly be green hydrogen, yeah, you do need to use renewable power all the time. And so batteries are part of that type of operation. Taylor is a businessman. If there's an opportunity that comes along to do a microgrid to support the police and fire safety infrastructure, or to support a green hydrogen project, I'm sure Decommissioning would be interested in talking
Cool.
to anyone who wanted to do that. Absolutely.
Keep us in the forefront though.
Yeah, I'd like to see the prior governor didn't really get much into energy. He was more into the generating parts of things, but NYSERDA is very much into green hydrogen and recognizing it, and also green ammonia, which is a potential fuel source for ships. In fact, I think the first cargo ships using green ammonia were launched this month. And it works better than hydrogen as a fuel substitute for bunker fuel, which is what most cargo ships use, right? Very, very dirty fuel. So for someone like me who lives on the Buffalo waterfront, I'd like to see cleaner ships. I'd also like to see a lot more cargo ships, but those kind of things, I'd love to see New York be more an emphasis on. And NYSERDA is certainly tied into them. I can give you some names at NYSERDA if you want to talk to people about the things that are doing.
No, I just wrote it down. I'll do some research now. Thank you. Sure.
Just as an aside, the Village of Blaisdell has been in discussions with Key Capture and actually passed a unanimous resolution back in 2019. So this has been ongoing. COVID kind of pushed things back. The tower was unanimously approved through the zoning board because it did not fit the codes of the Village of Blaisdell, and the zoning board was convened to undertake that task. So the board of the Village of Blaisdell is 100% behind this project. Just so you all know that.
Janet, did you have any citizens really?
We
rise
had
up
public
against-
hearings and we had people ask questions.
Yeah, but did
we
they
had-
really rise up against it?
No, residents came in and had questions, and I mean, a couple are similar to the questions that we received in writing, and they were answered.
I only got one question left. The firemen and everybody, because I know batteries and stuff, do they have to have specialized training for this plan or not?
I think it is, as I touched
Yeah.
on earlier, and we've done this with each operational project we have in Stillwater and down in the town and Rockland County. We have a training session. Obviously, we offer in person invite the local fire department and any mutual aid departments and just basically educate the fire department on, this is the use, this is what we're installing. These are the safety systems which exist within the use. And then we also, like before the project is operational, we'll bring them on site. Before the electrons are flowing, they'll be able to walk through the system and really understand the protocols. So we don't anticipate any specific new equipment is needed because the systems are really built to monitor themselves. But we do think like the communication is imperative.
Dan has been on the project from day one. Tyler came in kind of midstream, but the fellow before him had met with the fire department prior to it even coming to the board and the fire chief. And like we know in this area, fire chiefs change almost every year. So that chief is no longer, the new chief is, Jared is ready
And I spoke to Jared before the approval earlier.
So
The reason I asked, the reason I asked is because we've been trying to move when we do development stuff like this, to get our colleges or high school, our college education, if there's classes that you could support on, because obviously electric cars are coming out, probably the same type of source, you know what I'm saying, and battery stuff. If you're a company we work with, say an ECC or a local university, you have training for all our firemen in the whole area here, just not specifically there. Set something up with us, it'd be kind of nice.
I actually did so NYSERDA is really heavy on training and education. So I, myself and our director of health, safety, environment, and quality actually just did a training at SEP Polytechnic, where I, educated the students on just sort of how we decide the site projects and market operations, and then our HSEQ guy talks about that side of it. And then we actually took them to our operational project in Stillwater and just did a tour there. So I think we're, very open to considering that.
If you're unfamiliar with Stillwater, and I actually drove by their facility, it's just outside Saratoga Springs.
Is it?
The town of Stillwater.
Tyler, just in two things, SOP for local fire departments due to transitioning people, and I've always noticed, and this kind of goes back to my military days, it's just handy to have standard operating procedures. Would that something that you would work with the village and town, just have in case of emergency?
Absolutely. We'll have a operational plan, which includes, really any scenario that could occur, and would share that and communicate that with everyone.
And then lastly, it looks like according to the project description here, this substation, which enables the connection to the utility lines, will include various needed equipment to safely connect to the grid. Real property law 487 allows key capture energy exemption from property tax. So your company was proactive on approaching the village and us, right? You didn't have to pay any tax on this, or how'd that work, and what's the benefit here?
So when Ben Dorder, the original person, put it together, he was focused on property tax, and 487 he did exempt for up to 15 years. And we worked out a deal with the village for a pilot on that and send out the notice. What Ben did focus on is sales tax. So this is not intended to be picking on New York State, but I'm gonna pick on New York State. New York State.
Please do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So New York State is it won't surprise any of you to know that New York State is a happy cake to eat it too when it comes to taxing things. So these systems are real property for purposes of real property tax, but they're personal property for purposes of the sales tax. So what a lot of folks that we have found in the storage industry thought was that they would get a capital improvement exemption. You build something onto your house or your business, it's capital improvement, you own it, you don't pay sales tax on that. However, if it's a leased property, and almost every storage project in the country is leased property, you do not qualify for the capital improvement exemption anymore. And it has to be, and the rule is that it's not a capital improvement if you don't abandon, if you take it when you leave. And you have to be able to take it when you leave in order to qualify for the federal investment tax credit. So that led us to work with Sean and his team with Jennifer, which has been great. They've been super to work with, and it's in pursuit of the sales tax. We folded that in with the real property tax, so it's all one set of paperwork, one pilot. Jennifer has prepared a pilot, which we're very happy with. Taylor's team, finance team is reviewing it. It makes it more coordinated. However, we're still paying the village what we promised to pay the village. That our obligation to the village is not diminished at all by what we're seeking today. So it's in effect more revenue to the other jurisdictions as a result of switching over to the IDA approach. But it was sales tax that led us to seek out the IDA's assistance.
Thank you for explaining that. And then Janet, did you ever have a number of what the net gain is for the village by any chance?
I have it on my desk.
Sorry.
I don't,
I
It's
have,
certain-
I
we
mean,
can-
it's $20,000 a year for 15 years, and then the pilot is additional.
Okay, so what is it getting now?
So it's like, what are we getting in taxes on that
Just
property
ballpark.
now?
I have the.
$646-ish.
Let's go up to 1,000. So it's a net gain for the village per year of $19,000.
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely a gain on.
It's a host community agreement.
It's a good, we try to cite these projects, even if they're larger solar projects.
487 is in.
That isn't
Out,
likely
out.
to develop
But you have that, you can opt in or out, let's say. out the-
I've been a village
Exactly.
resident most of my life, spent 8 years in the Navy. I'm very familiar with the site and I'm very happy something is changing. But I only want to say that because sometimes there's a misconception out in the public that we're giving money, we're writing a check to you guys for this. And actually, we want to state that the entities in question are gaining significantly as far as the municipal side and the taxpayer in the village of Blaisdell and the town of Hamburg and the school district and the fire district, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so this is a net gain, and this is something that the leadership of this state and this government wants us to go to is renewable energy. And to go to renewable energy, we cannot do it without batteries, in my simplistic understanding.
Absolutely true, young man. Absolutely true.
I'm done. Sorry to take up so much time.
If I can add one other thing to your first question.
Yes, sir.
A lot of folks who ask us questions about battery storage because of some incidents that they see on the internet have happened. They particularly spurred on by the New York City Fire Department actually significantly changed their regulations related to battery storage in terms of the building code. And there have been no incidents in New York State. But the project that's in front of you meets all of the upgraded standards and really was designed to deal with any kind of emergency that come up, and including the SOPs in the operation. So the industry and the regulators have really upgraded the electrical codes to recognize the issues with batteries and stuff. And fire departments are obviously very aware that they're always concerned, for example, when they have to get jaws of life to an electric car. There's this potential safety issue. So everybody's coming up with, the New York State has made these facilities follow much more stricter standards. I think 2020 they adopted those upgrades, and this facility meets all the latest upgrades.
Thank you for your.
Well, one question on the safety topic. One thing, how is the fact that the internet isn't infallible? Are there backup systems to run this plant when the internet goes down?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that similar to any generation site, whether it's a gas plant or a wind plant, there's the SCADA system that allows it to communicate to the outside world. But there's also on site something called a BMS, a battery management system. So it's essentially a smart system that can effectively operate itself in any number of different potential sort of failure modes. So it's monitoring itself to see, is there any fluctuation in voltage, in temperature, it's measuring different parts of the system against itself. And if it notices anything out of the ordinary, it automatically shuts down that subpart, whether that's, one module or an entire container or the entire project. That happens automatically. The human on the other end is then notified and obviously plays a role in sort of identifying what the issue might be and then ensuring that it's only turned back on once the issue's solved. But even if the internet went down, the system would be able to continue with those operational modes and shut itself down if necessary.
And one of the notifications that I recall that operators do get is if the communication is down.
Absolutely.
And so the operator is also aware, like, if the internet's down, the operator's gonna aware of that as well.
On the real property tax end of it, there'll be no exemption on special district charges that are involved in there. The exemption for this is only going to apply to your basic town, county, school.
That's
village.
correct. That's state law that IDA is
Right.
going to give exemptions to special districts.
sweet spot.
I just had a question. So we're starting to see, obviously, with steel winds, Erie wind, IDAs throughout the state are seeing more energy projects. So this is being more commonplace, more so along the lines of solar in more rural areas and rural IDAs. They're seeing that and negotiating essentially a pilot or community host agreement. So we're seeing these emerge as a result of some of the benchmarks, I think, that the state had set forth. I don't know if this number was in my head, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but was there a target of 6,000 megawatts of batteries capacity?
So there's 3 targets that were in the Climate Leadership and Protection, Community Protection Act, as they're called. One for wind, one for solar. I think it's 9,000 for solar, then 3,000 for.
I mixed them up too.
It's like 9, 6, and 3. I forget which is which, but there were specific targets that the state set.
Okay.
So again, picking on the state a little bit, that law is meaningless. That law basically said, it's like drugs are bad, don't do them kind of law. It doesn't do anything. What's important is what came along later, the laws with the Public Service Commission actually set out the rules. How are we going to do energy storage? How are we going to do the interconnections? Changing the IDA rules to specifically say that renewable energy projects are allowable projects, and some IDAs weren't sure. Things like that, the actual meat of the details, but there were specific goals. And then what you get is you get Public Service Commission orders that say you, utility and other load serving entities, you will go out and procure this. So for storage, we have each utility in the state, including National Grid, was required to do, I think, 300 megawatts, and then Con Ed was 600.
No, so each utility in the state was 10, and then Con Ed was 300.
Okay.
National Grid is actually currently procuring 30 megawatts of projects, not this one, but other places. And several other utilities, Orange and Rockland, Con Ed, Central Hudson, all have active energy storage procurements right now.
And how much does 20 megawatts power? And then it's like in a household, something roughly, just to get an
That's
idea.
even, I don't remember,
It's about $1,000 per megawatt.
something like that.
The
Yeah.
general rule the industry uses, because it's really very variable, it's about $1,000 per megawatt.
But obviously, that's a factor of how long we're discharging energy. So
Right.
there's a lot of flexibility with the system. We don't have to charge or discharge with the full 20 megawatts. We could also discharge at 1 megawatt for much longer. So it's sort of dependent on your grid condition at the time. We have Capture has a full, in-house team. I'm obviously sort of on the front end of the project, but we have a construction team, and we also have a technology and operations team. So we're going to be, the long-term owner and operator of the project as well. So we're really invested in, the decisions we're making now are really important to ensure that 10 years from now, everything's right.
Hey, Sean, speaking of construction, did he meet our standards on the labor agreements?
Yeah, the local labor policy is signed.
Okay, thank you.
And just, part of our host community agreement, and in the agreement, it is very specific that the money that is received by the village is being put in a reserve to purchase emergency equipment. So we know that fire trucks and ambulances and police cars are very expensive pieces of equipment. So it is earmarked in our agreement with Capture Energy that money will be put aside for those uses. So that answers some of people's safety concerns, it's taking care of itself.
Great. Make a motion, to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Okay, let me do my roundtable for the first time. Any other questions or comments on the public hearing for Capture Energy? For the second time, questions or comments on Capture Energy?
Do we have any online?
We have one online who's not chatted, but it's Henry Zimmerfeld,
Henry's my associate.
who's an associate of Dan's.
You didn't ask a question, what a chicken.
He was actually at our last board meeting and answered a lot of questions.
Probably asked about who's that contact.
For the third and final time.
He's probably afraid to turn on his speaker because Henry has 2 little ones at home.
Ah.
Speaker, we question, and he's definitely on. Third and final time. Questions or comments on Key Capture Energy LLC? Okay, motion to close the public hearing
And move into the regular meeting.
and move into the regular meeting at 9:07 a.m.
So move.
Second.
Thank you, Davis. Thank you, Janet. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, this is a resolution of the Town of Hamburg Industrial Agency authorizing Key Capture Energy LLC, the lessee, to construct and install a 20 megawatt utility servicing battery energy storage facility for wholesale electric markets at 2026 Electric Avenue in the Village of Blaisdell. As agent for the agency for lease to the agency and subsequent lease back to the lessee and to take other actions. Whereas Key Capture Energy LLC has entered into negotiations with the officials of the Town of Hamburg Industrial Development Agency, also known as the agency, with respect to the construction and installation of a 20 megawatt utility servicing battery energy storage facility for wholesale electric markets at 2026 Electric Avenue in the Village of Blaisdell for lease to the agency and subsequent lease back to the lessee, also known as the project. The assistance contemplated by the agency will include mortgage tax abatement, sales tax exemption on any materials and or equipment purchased for incorporation into the project, and real tax abatement in accordance with existing agency uniform tax exemption policy and guidelines. And the lessee has submitted an eligibility questionnaire and other materials and information to the agency. The agency has, after giving all required notices, held a public hearing on the project pursuant to section 859-A of the general municipal law and letters stating that there will be a deviation from the agency's UTEP and describing the pilot deviation were mailed or delivered to each affected tax jurisdiction, and the project is in furtherance of the state of New York's energy goals, including reforming the energy vision policy and the New York State Energy Storage Roadmap. The lessee desires agency assistance in regard to the wholesale electric markets at 2026 Electric Avenue in the Village of Blaisdell for the continued growth of the lessee. The lessee needs an additional facility which is necessary to support the growth and the expansion of its operations if the assistance is granted. The lessee anticipates hiring another half-time employee at the project location in the Village of Blaisdell within 2 years following the completion of the project. Now therefore, the Town of Hamburg Industrial Development Agency hereby resolves as follows. The agency hereby determines that the acquisition, construction, and equipping and installation of the project and the financing or other assistance thereof by the agency pursuant to the New York State Industrial Development Agency Act will promote and is authorized by and will be in furtherance of the policy of the state as set forth in said act. The lessee is authorized to initiate the construction and installation of a utility servicing battery energy storage facility at 2026 Electric Avenue in the Village of Blaisdell by the lessee as agent for the agency for lease to the agency and subsequent lease back to the lessee, and to proceed with the acquisition and installation of machinery, equipment, furnishings, and fixtures required in connection therewith at a total project cost not to exceed $19,613,354. Subject to the obtaining of all required approvals from the Village of Blaisdell and other involved governmental agencies, and to advance such funds as may be necessary to accomplish such purposes. The agency is hereby authorized to enter into such agreements with the lessee as the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, or other officer may deem necessary in order to accomplish the above. The lessee is authorized to make purchases of goods and services relating to the project that would otherwise be subject to New York State sales and local use tax in an amount up to $18,323,354, which may result in New York State and local sales and use tax exemption benefits not to exceed $1,603,293. The agency hereby authorizes and approves real property tax abatement benefits structured through a 20-year payment in lieu of taxes agreement, pilot agreement, estimated to provide $180,723 in real property tax abatement benefits. and resulting in estimated total payments in lieu of taxes of $440,380.08 over the term of the pilot agreement. The agency hereby authorizes and approves the value of the mortgage to be placed upon the facility shall not to exceed $13,618,012, and that mortgage tax exemption benefit shall not exceed $102,126. The execution and delivery of a mortgage from the agency and the lessee to a lender selected by the lessee and approved by the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, or assistant secretary in an amount not to exceed $13,618,012 and other ancillary documents if required, which mortgage and ancillary documents shall be substantially in the form approved by the agency from prior transactions or in form approved by the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, or assistant secretary is hereby authorized. Almost there. The resolution shall take effect immediately and continue in full force and effect from 1 year from the date hereof and on after such 1 year anniversary, the agency may, at its option, terminate the effectiveness of this resolution or allow the lessee additional time in which to close the transactions contemplated by this resolution based upon affirmative actions taken by the lessee to complete such transactions. Upon any allowance of additional time to close, the agency may charge the lessee an extension fee in accordance with the agency's fee schedule. Okay. Motion,
I'll motion. Bob,
No, go ahead.
I'll motion.
Andy, second.
Norma's gonna do it.
Thank you,
Second.
Norma.
I'm sorry, Norma, did you want the motion?
I want to know if
Your
you're
group.
at the meeting.
On to questions. Does the board have any additional questions? Any questions regarding the financials on this project? As noted in the
Just a
resolution.
comment. Thank you, Jennifer, for all your hard work and the whole board. I'm sure it's excellent.
Thank you for investment in our community.
Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call around the room. Chairman Palmer,
Yes.
Norma Russer Kelly,
Yes.
Davis Bukowski,
Yes.
Mayor Tom Moses,
Yes.
Bob Hutchison,
Yes.
Jan McGregor Clark,
Yes.
Bob Reynolds.
Yes.
Okay, resolution carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate the effort you all put in.
Appreciate it. Any call for executive session? Can I have a motion to adjourn at 9:16 a.m.?
So move.
Thank
I'll
you,
second
Mayor.
it.
Thank you, Norma. All in favor? Opposed?
In the book.
Go Bills.
Go Bills. Max was in yesterday to pay his